The emergency transmission cut through the peaceful silence of deep space like a scream in the night. On planet Oriel, Elder Prism watched helplessly as the sky filled with hostile ships. His crystalline body pulsed with distressed patterns of light, visible to every member of his species across the city of Luminacy. The Luminari had never known war. They were beings of pure philosophy, creatures who spent centuries contemplating the nature of existence, while their bodies glowed with bioluminescent beauty. Violence was something they had evolved beyond, or so they believed. The Ravagers cared nothing for philosophy. These biomechanical pirates swept down from the stars with one purpose: to strip Oriel of its resources and take whatever they wanted. Their ships were grotesque things, half-living vessels that pulsed with stolen technology. Within hours, 3 massive hive ships positioned themselves in orbit while smaller attack craft descended on the helpless cities below. Elder Prism made the only choice he could. His people had no weapons, no defenses, no concept of combat tactics. He activated the ancient emergency beacon that connected them to the Galactic Assembly. Surely the advanced civilizations of the Council would come to their aid. Surely someone would help. The response came swiftly, but it was not what he hoped. The Galactic Council acknowledged their distress. Help was being prepared. Estimated arrival time 47 standard cycles, nearly 2 months by human reckoning. The Luminari would be extinct long before then. Prism felt his light dim to almost nothing. They were going to die, and the galaxy would mourn them politely after the fact. 3 billion kilometers away, in a different part of space entirely, Admiral Rebecca Holt reviewed the same distress signal at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station Odin. She was a compact woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Earth was still relatively new to galactic politics, and humanity's reputation preceded them wherever they went. The other species whispered about the Death Worlders, the predators from a savage planet who had somehow achieved spaceflight. "Play it again," Holt ordered. The signal repeated. It was a simple plea, translated by their computers into English. "We are dying. Please help us. The Ravagers have come. We have no defenses, please." Her tactical officer, a young man named Peter Russo, shook his head. "Admiral, we're not authorized to intervene in non-human conflicts. The Council has strict protocols about this. The Council is 47 cycles away," Holt said flatly. "How long would it take us to reach them?" Russo ran the calculations. 11 days at maximum, faster than light speed. "But Admiral, humanity is still on probationary status with the Galactic Assembly. If we intervene without authorization, there could be serious political consequences." Holt studied the distress signal data. The Luminari were pacifists. True pacifists, not just peaceful by choice but by evolutionary design. They literally could not conceive of violence. And the Ravagers were known throughout the galaxy as brutal scavengers who showed no mercy. "Prep the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet," she said. "Full combat load. I want the carrier Retribution and all escort vessels ready to move in 3 hours." "Admiral, I have to protest this decision," Russo said carefully. "The political fallout is my problem, not yours," Holt interrupted. "Someone sent a distress call. Someone is dying. We can reach them in time to help. That's all I need to know. Now execute my orders, Lieutenant Commander." Russo saluted and moved to comply. Holt knew she was potentially throwing away her career, maybe even facing a court-martial. Humanity had been so eager to prove they belonged among the civilized species of the galaxy. But what was civilization worth if you ignored pleas for help because of paperwork? The Retribution was a beast of a ship, a kilometer-long carrier that served as the mobile base for Earth's deep space operations. Captain David Reeves commanded her, a tall man with steady hands and a reputation for getting his people home alive. When he received Holt's orders, he didn't hesitate. Within 2 hours, his crew was at battle stations and the fleet was accelerating toward the jump point. Dr. Amara Osei, the fleet's xenolinguist, studied everything they knew about the Luminari during the journey. She was a woman who loved languages and cultures, who had dreamed of peaceful first contact with alien species. This was not how she had imagined meeting a new civilization. "They're pure pacifists," she briefed the command staff. "Not just culturally, but biologically. Their brains lack the neural structures for aggression. They literally cannot comprehend violence as a solution to problems." "Then how have they survived this long?" Reeves asked. "The Galactic Council protects them. They're considered a treasure, a species that achieved enlightenment. They create the most beautiful art and philosophy in the known galaxy. Everyone respects them. Everyone except the Ravagers, apparently, Reeves said dryly. The fleet pushed their engines to the limit. 11 days in faster-than-light travel was 11 days too long, but it was the best they could do. Back on Oriole, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The Ravagers had landed ground forces, biological nightmares that moved through the crystal cities harvesting anything valuable. The Luminary could only flee and hide. Elder Prism watched his people die and wondered if their civilization's greatest achievement, their absolute rejection of violence, was also their fatal flaw. His species had spent 10,000 years perfecting peace. They had created paradise. But paradise, it turned out, needed guardians. On the 11th day, the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Oriole's star system. The tactical screens immediately lit up with contacts. 3 Ravager capital ships in orbit. Dozens of smaller vessels swarming around the planet like insects. Energy signatures indicated ongoing bombardment of the surface. "Get me a damage assessment," Reeves ordered. "And someone find out if there are any Luminari left alive down there." The answer to both questions came quickly. The planet's cities were heavily damaged but not destroyed. The Ravagers were taking their time, harvesting systematically. And yes, life signs indicated millions of Luminari still survived. Though their numbers were dropping steadily, Admiral Holt opened a channel across all frequencies, broadcasting in every language their computers could manage. "This is Admiral Rebecca Holt of the Earth vessel Retribution. Ravager forces, you are ordered to cease all hostile actions immediately and withdraw from this system." The response was a burst of incomprehensible noise that their computers struggled to translate. The Ravagers were not interested in negotiation. "Didn't think so," Holt muttered. She turned to her communications officer. "Get me a line to the Luminari leadership. Let them know the cavalry has arrived." On the surface of Oriole, Elder Prism received the transmission with a mixture of hope and terror. He knew of humanity. Everyone in the galaxy knew of humanity. They were the species that evolved on a death world, a planet so hostile that only the strongest, most aggressive creatures survived. They were predators who had climbed to the top of their food chain through violence and cunning. The Galactic Council watched them nervously, unsure if humanity would prove to be a blessing or a curse to galactic civilization. And now these predators had come to Oriole. Prism didn't know whether to feel saved or doomed. Perhaps both. "This is Elder Prism of the Luminari," he responded, his voice transmitted through light patterns that human technology translated to audio. "We received your transmission. Are you truly here to help us?" Admiral Holt's response was simple and direct. "Yes, but you need to trust us and stay out of our way. We're going to do things that might frighten you. Can you do that?" Prism looked at the ruins of his civilization, at his dying people. "We have no choice. Please save whoever you can." "That's the plan," Holt said. "Retribution out." She turned to face her command crew. Every eye was on her, waiting for orders. Outside the viewports, Oriole hung in space like a wounded jewel. Above it, the Ravager fleet was beginning to notice the new arrivals. "All ships," Holt said calmly. "Weapons free. Show them why you don't mess with Earth." The Ravager hive ships hung in orbit like diseased moons, their organic hulls pulsing with stolen power systems. They had been feeding on Oriole for days, growing fat on the pacifist civilization below. When their sensors detected the human fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel, the Ravager collective consciousness barely registered concern. These new ships were small by their standards. Just another species to harvest. That assumption would cost them dearly. Elder Prism stood in what remained of Luminace's central command spire, watching the human ships approach on holographic displays. His people had gathered around him, thousands of Luminari whose crystalline bodies flickered with anxious light patterns. They had all heard the stories about humanity, the galaxy's youngest spacefaring species, the Deathworlders who still practiced warfare, the predators who had somehow avoided destroying themselves long enough to reach the stars. "What have we done?" whispered Warden Gleam, the closest thing the Luminary had to a military liaison. His title was ceremonial, a remnant from ancient times before the Luminary had evolved beyond conflict. He had never expected to actually deal with military matters. "We called for help and received monsters." "Monsters fighting monsters," Prism replied quietly. Perhaps that is what we need. The human fleet moved with purpose that startled the luminary observers. Their ships did not drift peacefully through space. They prowled. The Retribution took point, its escort vessels spreading out in a formation that the luminary computers identified as a combat pattern. Weapons systems came online, energy signatures spiking across the spectrum. Elder Prism, we're receiving another transmission from the human flagship, a communications specialist announced, his light pulsing yellow with stress. Put it through. A woman's face appeared on the display. Admiral Holt looked tired but determined. Elder, we're going to need some information from you. What are the Ravagers after? What are they harvesting? Prism's light dimmed with shame. Everything. Our cities are built from living crystal that grows in harmony with our consciousness. The Ravagers are mining it. They are also taking our people. We do not know why. Slaves or food, probably both, Holt said bluntly. Several Luminari in the command center pulsed with shock at her directness.
How many of your people are still alive?
Approximately 7 million in Luminous alone. Perhaps 20 million across the planet. We had a population of 100 million before the attack. Holt's expression hardened. We're going to get as many of you out as we can. But I need you to start evacuating your people from the cities. Get them underground into whatever shelters you have. Things are about to get loud. We will comply, Prism said. Then he hesitated. Admiral, I must ask. Why are you helping us? Your species has no treaty with ours. The Galactic Council has not authorized this intervention. For the first time, Holt smiled slightly. Elder, one of my ancestors had a saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Someone asked for help. We came, it's that simple. But the political consequences are my problem, not yours. Now get your people to safety. We have work to do. Retribution out. The transmission ended. Prism immediately began coordinating the evacuation, though his mind struggled with the human concept. They had come across the galaxy, risking political disaster simply because someone needed help. It was noble and terrifying in equal measure. Captain Reeves studied the tactical situation from the Retribution's command center. His tactical officer, Peter Russo, had already identified the Ravager fleet composition and attack patterns. 3 capital ships, sir, designated Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Alpha is the largest, approximately 3 kilometers in length. Dozens of smaller attack craft, mostly sublight. They're using hit-and-run tactics on the surface, grabbing what they can and retreating to the hive ships. Energy signatures? Moderate. Their shields are biological, regenerating but not particularly strong. Weapons are primarily plasma-based with some kinetic systems. Nothing we haven't seen before, Reeves nodded slowly. The Ravagers were predators of a different kind than humans. They relied on overwhelming weaker species, scavenging rather than fighting peer opponents. They probably had never encountered serious resistance. Launch all fighter wings, he ordered. I want combat air patrol established around the planet. Any Ravager ship that tries to reach the surface gets turned into debris. Coordinate with the escort vessels for firing solutions on those capital ships. Sir, shouldn't we try to negotiate first? Asked a junior officer. They've already answered that question, Reeves said grimly. They're still attacking the surface. Actions speak louder than words. On Oriel's surface, Dr. Amara Osei had taken a shuttle down to meet the Luminari in person. She believed that understanding between species required face-to-face contact, even in crisis situations. The shuttle landed in a plaza filled with frightened refugees, and Amara stepped out wearing a lightweight environmental suit. The Luminari were beautiful. Their crystalline bodies refracted light into rainbow patterns, and they communicated through shifting colors and luminescent pulses. Amara's translator struggled to keep up with the complexity of their language. Warden Gleam approached her cautiously. His people had never seen a human before, and Amara could read the fear in his light patterns even without translation. I am Dr. Amara Osei, she said slowly, trying to project calm. I'm here to help coordinate the evacuation. You are human, Gleam stated, his colors shifting to deep blue. Your species still practices warfare. Yes, Amara admitted. There was no point in denying it. We do, but that's not all we are. We also practice medicine, art, science, philosophy, just like you, but you can kill. Your species is designed for violence. Amara chose her words carefully. Every species has the capacity for violence. The question is what you choose to do with that capacity. We choose to use it to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is a paradox. Violence in service of peace. Welcome to the human condition, Amara said with a sad smile. We live in the gray areas between ideals and reality. Their conversation was interrupted by a massive explosion overhead. The Luminari scattered in panic, their bodies flashing white with terror. Amara looked up to see a Ravager attack craft break apart in the atmosphere, torn to pieces by human fighter interceptors. Burning debris rained down kilometers away. Gleam stared at the destruction. They died so quickly. The fighters will protect you, Amara assured him. Now please, we need to get these people underground. More will come. In orbit, the battle had begun in earnest. Wing Commander Patricia Hayes led her fighter squadron in a weaving pattern between the Ravager ships and the planet. Her pilots flew with practiced precision, coordinating their attacks like predators hunting in packs. Gold 3, break left. 2 bogeys on your 6, she called out. Copy, Gold Leader. Breaking. Human fighters danced through space, their weapon systems far more accurate than the Ravagers expected. Every time a Ravager craft tried to descend toward Oriel, it ran into a wall of interceptors. The Ravagers had numbers, but humans had tactics honed through centuries of warfare. On the Retribution, Admiral Holt watched the engagement unfold. The Ravagers were adapting quickly, pulling back their smaller ships and preparing their capital vessels for a coordinated strike. They're getting smart, Russo observed. Then we get smarter, Holt replied. She opened a channel to Captain Reeves. David, I need you to do something risky. Take the Retribution forward. Make yourself a target. Reeves understood immediately. You want to draw them in. Exactly. They see a big target, they can't resist. When they commit, our escort vessels hit them from the flanks. Classic hammer and anvil. And if they don't take the bait, then we go to plan B, but I think they will. Predators always go for what looks like easy prey. Reeves gave the order, and the massive carrier began moving forward, its escort vessels deliberately falling back. To the Ravagers, it looked like the human flagship was overextending, separating from its support. The Ravager collective consciousness saw the opportunity. The large human ship was advancing alone. Destroy it and the rest would flee. All 3 hive ships began moving into attack position. On Oriel, Elder Prism watched the human vessel advance toward the enemy fleet. What are they doing? That ship is alone. It will be destroyed. Dr. Ose, monitoring the same tactical feed, recognized the pattern. No, Elder, they're hunting. And the Ravagers just became the prey. The 3 Ravager capital ships accelerated toward the Retribution, weapons charging. Their plasma cannons could tear apart most vessels in the galaxy. They closed the distance rapidly, eager to end this interference. Then Admiral Holt sprang the trap. All escort vessels execute flanking maneuver. Now. The human destroyers and cruisers that had seemed to fall back suddenly accelerated from above and below the orbital plane. They had never retreated. They had repositioned. Now they caught the Ravager hive ships in a devastating crossfire. Missiles streaked through space, energy weapons carved into biological hull plating. The Ravagers found themselves trapped between the advancing Retribution and the flanking escorts. This is for every person you killed down there, Holt said quietly, watching the battle unfold. The Luminari throughout their cities watched the orbital battle through their collective consciousness link. They saw human ships move with coordinated precision. They saw weapons unleashed with calculated fury. They saw the Ravagers, the monsters who had terrorized them for days, suddenly fighting desperately for survival. And they began to understand something profound. Violence was not the opposite of civilization. Sometimes violence was what protected civilization. The humans were not monsters. They were guardians with fangs. The Crystal Gardens had once been Luminace's greatest treasure, a sprawling park where living crystal formations grew in impossible shapes, each one singing with harmonic frequencies that the Luminary found deeply soothing. Now the gardens were a battlefield, and the singing crystals were silent, many shattered by Ravager mining equipment. Sergeant Ann Foster crouched behind a broken crystal formation. Her squad spread out in defensive positions around her. They were United Earth Marines, veterans of hostile world deployments, and every one of them knew they were a long way from home. Anne was a compact woman with sharp eyes and quick reflexes, the kind of person who stayed calm when everything went wrong. Movement, 3 o'clock, called out Corporal James Martinez from his position. Multiple contacts. Ravager ground forces. Anne brought up her tactical visor and saw them. The Ravagers on the ground were horrifying things. Biomechanical hybrids that moved on too many legs. They carried weapons that looked grown rather than built. Organic rifles that spat corrosive projectiles. Intelligence said they were semi-intelligent, operating on hive instinct directed by the larger collective consciousness aboard the ships. Hold fire until they're in the kill zone, Anne ordered. Let them think this position is undefended. The Ravagers were hunting for Luminari refugees, a group of about 50 crystalline beings huddled in what remained of a meditation temple behind the marine positions. When the Ravagers had first landed, they had walked through the peaceful Luminari like wolves through sheep, meeting no resistance because the Luminari were incapable of giving any. That changed when humanity arrived. The Ravager squad, 12 strong, moved into the garden's central plaza. They were confident, arrogant even. They had faced no opposition on this world, just frightened prey creatures who fled or froze. Now, Anne said calmly, her Marines opened fire with coordinated precision. Rifle rounds punched through Ravager armor. Grenades arced through the air and detonated among the confused enemy. In less than 10 seconds, 8 Ravagers were down. The remaining 4 tried to return fire but found themselves caught in a carefully prepared crossfire. Anne moved from cover, her rifle tracking smoothly. She put 2 rounds into a Ravager's center mass, then shifted to the next target. Her squad advanced in a textbook formation, covering each other's movement. Within 30 seconds, all 12 Ravagers were neutralized. Cease fire, Anne called. Martinez, Jones, secure the perimeter. Chen, check our guests. Make sure they're okay. Private Lisa Chen moved to the temple where the Luminari refugees were sheltering. They were pulsing with rapid light patterns that her translator interpreted as extreme distress. One of them, a younger Luminari named Radiance, approached Chen cautiously. You killed them, Radiance said, her light patterns showing confusion rather than gratitude. You killed living beings. Chen lowered her rifle and tried to project calm. Yes, we did. Because they were going to kill you, but killing is wrong. All life is sacred. That is the foundation of civilization, is it? Chen asked gently. Those Ravagers killed thousands of your people. They were about to kill 50 more. We stopped them. Was that wrong? Radiance's lights flickered through a complex pattern of colors. Her entire worldview was being challenged. I do not know anymore. Everything I believed seems less certain now. Before Chen could respond, Anne's voice cut across the squad channel. We've got company. Big company. Multiple Ravager squads converging on this position. They're adapting faster than expected. The Marines immediately shifted into defensive positions. Anne pulled up her tactical map and counted at least 40 Ravager contacts approaching from 3 directions. Her squad numbered 8. Not good odds, but Marines trained for this. Command, this is Foster, she called on the long-range channel. We've got a situation at the Crystal Gardens. Request immediate support. Captain Reeves's voice came back from orbit. Support is inbound, Sergeant. Hold your position. Protect those civilians, understood. We're not going anywhere. Anne turned to the Luminary refugees. Everyone get to the lowest level of that temple and stay there. Do not come out until we tell you it's safe. The Luminari hesitated. Radiance spoke up. Should we not flee? You cannot possibly fight so many. Anne checked her rifle and smiled grimly. You'd be surprised what 8 angry humans can do. Now move. The Luminari retreated into the temple as the first Ravager squads entered the garden. This time they were cautious, having learned that this was not an undefended position. They advanced using cover, coordinating their movement. They were adapting to human tactics. They're learning, Martinez observed. So are we, Anne replied. Let's teach them another lesson. Flanking positions on my mark. The Marines split into 2 fire teams and repositioned. When the Ravagers pushed forward, they found themselves caught in another deadly crossfire. But this time the Ravagers were ready. They returned fire with discipline, forcing the Marines into cover. The battle devolved into a brutal exchange of gunfire among the crystal formations. The beautiful gardens became a war zone, filled with the crack of rifles and the hiss of Ravager plasma weapons. Anne moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, her squad working like a single organism. Radiance watched from the temple entrance, unable to look away. She saw humans fight with a combination of skill and fury that her species had never conceived possible. They were organized, disciplined, but also utterly ruthless when necessary. Every movement had purpose. Every shot was calculated. They were not mindless killers. They were professionals, and their profession was war. A Ravager broke through the perimeter and charged toward the temple. Radiance froze, unable to even conceive of defending herself. Anne intercepted the creature, putting herself between the alien and the Luminari. The Ravager was twice her size, but Anne didn't hesitate. She emptied her rifle into its torso at point-blank range until it collapsed. "Stay down," Anne snapped at Radiance, then returned to the fight. The battle raged for 20 minutes that felt like hours. The Marines' ammunition was running low when support finally arrived. A human dropship screamed over the gardens, its guns chattering. Ravager positions exploded under the aerial assault. The surviving enemy creatures retreated, finally recognizing that this was not prey but a peer predator. Anne did a quick count. All 8 of her Marines were still standing, though Martinez had taken a glancing hit to his armor. 40+ Ravagers had attacked their position. Fewer than 10 had retreated. "Secure the area," she ordered, exhaustion creeping into her voice. Medical check on Martinez. Everyone else standard defensive perimeter. Radiance emerged from the temple along with the other Luminary refugees. They approached the human positions cautiously, their lights pulsing with complex emotions that even their sophisticated language struggled to express. "You were willing to die for us," Radiance said to Anne. "Beings you had never met before today." Anne was reloading her rifle, checking her equipment with practiced hands. "That's the job. But why? What do you gain from this?" Anne looked at the young Luminari directly. "Sleep at night. The knowledge that we did the right thing. That's enough." "I do not understand your species," Radiance admitted. "You are capable of such violence, yet you use it to protect strangers. You are predators who guard the prey. It is a paradox." "Yeah, well, humanity is full of those," Anne said. She gestured to the destroyed Ravagers. "Those things are predators too. But there's a difference. They kill because that's all they know. We kill because sometimes that's the only way to stop the killing. You see the difference?" Radiance's lights pulsed thoughtfully. "I am beginning to. My people have believed for 10,000 years that we evolved beyond violence. We thought we had achieved true civilization. But now I wonder if we simply had the luxury of never being tested. Peace is easier when someone else handles the ugly work." Anne agreed. "Your species is lucky. You had the Galactic Council protecting you. You never had to get your hands dirty. Most species aren't that lucky. What was your world like?" Radiance asked. "Before you reached the stars?" Anne thought about Earth. Oceans that could swallow ships. Predators in the forests. Diseases that killed millions. Wars that scarred continents. Brutal, unforgiving. A planet that tried to kill us every single day. We survived because we learned to fight back. We learned to work together, to protect our own, to never give up no matter how bad things got. It made us hard, but it also made us human." In orbit above them, the space battle continued. Admiral Holt's trap had crippled one Ravager hive ship and damaged another. But the fighting was far from over. The Ravagers were calling for reinforcements, and long-range sensors detected more ships entering the system. Captain Reeves studied the updated tactical display and made a decision. "Prepare boarding teams. We're going to hit that damaged hive ship and see if we can find any captured Luminari." "Sir, boarding a Ravager vessel is extremely dangerous," Russo protested. "Their ships are designed to be hostile environments for other species." "Which is why we're sending Marines, not diplomats," Reeves replied. "Contact Sergeant Foster's unit. When they're done securing the Crystal Gardens, I want them prepped for a ship-to-ship assault." Anne received the orders just as her squad was establishing a secure perimeter around the refugee temple. She looked at her Marines, all of them tired, running on adrenaline and training. "Gear up," she told them. "We're going hunting in space next. And I want everyone to remember, we don't leave people behind, human or otherwise." Her squad gave a chorus of affirmatives. They were exhausted, but they were also United Earth Marines. This was what they trained for. This was who they were. Radiance watched them prepare with growing understanding. These humans were warriors, yes. Killers, absolutely. But they were also something her species had never needed to be. Guardians. They had teeth and claws not just for hunting, but for protecting. They were wolves, but wolves who guarded the flock rather than feeding on it. And for the first time in her life, Radiance began to question whether her species' absolute pacifism was enlightenment or simply naive privilege. Space around Oriel had become a graveyard. Debris from destroyed Ravager ships tumbled through orbital paths while human fighters weaved between the wreckage like sharks circling wounded prey. The damaged Ravager hive ship designated Beta was venting atmosphere, its biological hull breached in a dozen places. But it was still dangerous, still armed, and still holding prisoners. Wing Commander Patricia Hayes pulled her fighter into a tight formation with her squadron. She had been flying combat missions for 12 years, and she had never seen anything quite like a Ravager hive ship up close. It was obscene, a 3-kilometer tumor of stolen technology and organic matter fused into something that should not exist. Gold Squadron, maintain combat air patrol around the hive ship, she ordered. Nothing gets in or out without my authorization. Silver Squadron, you're on overwatch for the boarding operation. Copy. Gold Leader, came the responses. The boarding craft launched from the Retribution, armored shuttles carrying Marine assault teams. Anne Foster watched Oriole shrink below them through the shuttle's viewport. Beside her, the rest of her squad checked their equipment with practiced efficiency. They had traded their standard rifles for boarding weapons. Shotguns, submachine guns, weapons designed for close-quarters combat in confined spaces. First time boarding a hostile ship? Asked Private Lisa Chen, trying to calm her nerves with conversation. Third, Anne replied. First was a pirate vessel off Mars. Second was a derelict research station that had been overrun by corrupted AI. Both of those were human ships. This is going to be different. How different? The ship itself might try to kill us. Ravager vessels are partially alive. They can seal corridors, change their internal layout, even release toxins. We're not just fighting the crew. We're fighting the ship. The shuttle shuddered as it approached the damaged section of the hive ship. Through the viewport, they could see the wound in the vessel's hull, a massive breach that exposed twisted corridors and pulsing organic walls. 30 seconds, called the pilot. Anne stood and addressed her squad. Listen up. Our mission is simple. Locate any luminary prisoners and extract them. We're not here to hold territory or destroy the ship. Get in, find the prisoners, get out. Questions? Corporal Martinez raised his hand. What if we encounter heavy resistance? Then we demonstrate why you don't kidnap people when humans are around. Standard rules of engagement. Anyone shooting at you or the prisoners, you put them down. Hard. The shuttle locked onto the hull breach and extended its boarding tube. The airlock cycled and the Marines moved in. Anne went first, her weapon up and ready. The interior of the Ravager ship was like walking into a nightmare. The walls pulsed with faint light, organic tissue interwoven with mechanical systems. The air was thick and humid with a smell like rotting vegetation mixed with machine oil. Move with purpose, Anne whispered. Double-check your corners. Remember, the ship can hear us. They advanced into the corridors and immediately the environment began to change. Passages that had been open started to constrict. Walls shifted and moved like living muscle. The Ravager hive ship had detected intruders and was responding. This is insane, Chen muttered as a doorway ahead of them began to seal itself. Breaching charge, Anne ordered. Fast. Martinez slapped an explosive charge onto the closing door and the squad fell back. The charge detonated, blowing the door open. They moved through quickly before the ship could adapt again. Their scanners detected life signs deeper in the ship. Luminary biosignatures faint but present. Anne led her squad through the twisting corridors, fighting not just the environment but also Ravager defenders. The creatures emerged from side passages and hidden alcoves, their weapons spitting corrosive rounds. The Marines responded with brutal efficiency. In the tight corridors, their close-quarters weapons were devastating. Shotgun blasts tore through Ravager armor. Grenades turned intersections into kill zones. Anne moved through the chaos like a machine, her training overriding any fear or hesitation. They found the first group of prisoners in what could only be described as a harvesting chamber. 30 luminari were held in organic pods, their crystalline bodies dimmed almost to nothing. The sight made Chen's stomach turn. The Ravagers had been draining them, harvesting their unique biology for unknown purposes. Get them out, Anne ordered. Cut those pods open, carefully. While her squad worked to free the prisoners, Anne held the corridor against Ravager counterattacks. She could hear the ship around them, groaning and shifting like a living thing in pain. The hive ship was dying from the damage it had sustained in the battle, but it had enough life left to be dangerous. One of the freed Luminari, a being whose light had nearly gone out entirely, reached toward Chen with a trembling crystalline hand. Why do you help us? We are nothing to you. Chen helped support the weakened alien. Your people in trouble. That's all that matters. More Marines were pushing deeper into the ship, finding more prisoners. The Retribution's tactical team was coordinating the operation, feeding location data to the boarding teams. They estimated over 200 Luminary were being held across the damaged hive ship. On the Retribution's bridge, Captain Reeves monitored the operation while simultaneously managing the larger space battle. The Ravagers had received reinforcements, 2 more hive ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They were adapting their tactics, becoming more cautious, more coordinated. "Admiral, we're going to have to choose," Reeves said to Holt. "Either we pull the boarding teams back and engage the new arrivals, or we commit to the extraction and risk getting caught in a 2-front engagement." Holt studied the tactical display. Mathematics said they should retreat, secure what they had, fight another day. But mathematics did not account for the 200 Luminary still trapped aboard that ship. "We hold position," she decided. "Commit the reserve fighters to intercept the new arrivals. Buy our people time to complete the extraction. That's going to stretch us thin." "Admiral, then we had better be very good at our jobs." "Captain." Wing Commander Hayes received the new orders and felt her stomach drop. Her fighters were already running low on ammunition and fuel. Now they were being ordered to engage fresh enemy ships that outnumbered them. She looked at her squadron, at the pilots she had trained with, fought beside, trusted with her life. "All wings form up on me," she ordered. "We're going to show these new arrivals what happens when you crash Earth's party uninvited." Her fighters accelerated toward the approaching Ravager ships. The new hive ships launched their own attack craft in space filled with combat. Hayes flew with aggressive precision, her weapons finding targets with practiced accuracy. Around her, her squadron fought like demons, their ships dancing through the enemy formations. It was not a battle humanity could win through superior numbers or firepower. They were outnumbered, outgunned, running on fumes. But they had something the Ravagers lacked: centuries of experience fighting impossible odds. Every human pilot knew their history, knew the stories of battles won against overwhelming force through skill and determination. On the damaged hive ship, Anne's squad had linked up with 2 other Marine teams. They had freed over 100 Luminary and were fighting their way back to the extraction point. The ship's immune response had fully activated now, and they were facing heavy resistance. A Marine named Jackson went down, a Ravager plasma round burning through his armor. Anne dragged him to cover while Chen and Martinez laid down suppressing fire. "How bad?" Anne asked, checking Jackson's wound. "Bad enough," he gasped. "Leave me. Get the civilians out." "We don't leave people behind," Anne said flatly. She pulled an emergency medical pack from her belt. "Martinez, I need you to carry Jackson. Chen, you're on point. Everyone else, tight formation. We move together or not at all." A young Luminary named First Light, one of the rescued prisoners, watched in amazement. The humans were wounded, exhausted, outnumbered, but they refused to abandon anyone. It went against all logic, all self-preservation instinct. It was noble and foolish and brave. "Your species is insane," First Light said to Chen. Chen grinned despite the situation. "Yeah, we get that a lot." "Keep moving." They fought their way corridor by corridor, room by room. Every meter was contested. The ship itself seemed to fight against them. Walls closing, floors becoming unstable, toxic gases being released. But the Marines adapted faster than the ship could respond, using explosives to open new paths, environmental suits to protect against the toxins. Finally, they reached the extraction point. The boarding shuttles were waiting, their pilots performing impossible maneuvers to hold position against the ship's dying convulsions. Anne counted her people as they loaded the rescued Luminary. "Everyone accounted for?" she asked. "All Marines present," Martinez confirmed. "Plus 143 Luminary civilians." "Then let's go home." The shuttles pulled away from the dying hive ship just as a massive explosion tore through its core. The vessel broke apart in a silent fireball, its biological components burning in the vacuum. Anne watched it die and felt no satisfaction, only relief that they had gotten everyone out. In space beyond, Hayes' fighter squadron was running on empty. 3 of her pilots were gone, their fighters destroyed in the desperate holding action, but they had bought the time needed. The boarding teams were clear. "All wings, break contact and return to carrier," Hayes ordered. "We've done our job." Admiral Holt watched the tactical display as her forces withdrew to defensive positions around Oriel. They had bloodied the Ravagers badly, destroyed 1 hive ship, rescued over 100 prisoners, but the cost was mounting. Her fleet was battered, running low on ammunition and fuel, and there were still Ravager ships in the system. "Status report," she ordered. Russo compiled the data. "We've lost 3 fighters, 2 damaged beyond field repair. Marine casualties, 4 dead, 12 wounded. Ship damage across the fleet is moderate but manageable. The Retribution took several hits but remains combat effective." Holt nodded slowly. Earth Command would be demanding answers soon. The Galactic Council would be outraged at the unauthorized intervention. Political consequences would be severe. None of that mattered right now. "What about the Luminari?" she asked. "Civilian casualties on the planet are estimated at 70 million. But we've stabilized the situation. No new attacks in the last 3 hours. The Ravagers are regrouping." On Oriel's surface, Elder Prism stood among his people in the refugee shelters. The humans had stopped the slaughter, but at what cost? He watched the human Marines moving among the Luminari, offering medical aid, providing security, treating them with respect and compassion. These predators from a death world had crossed the galaxy to protect strangers. They had bled for people they had never met. They were everything the Galactic Council had warned about, violent and dangerous and unpredictable. But they were also something his species had never truly understood. Warriors who fought not for conquest but for protection. Radiance approached him, her light patterns showing profound confusion. "Elder, I have been speaking with the humans, learning about their history, their culture. Did you know their world tried to kill them? Predators, diseases, natural disasters. They evolved fighting for survival every single day." "I have heard this, yes. They could have become monsters. They should have destroyed themselves. But instead they learned to protect each other. They created codes of honor, rules of warfare, concepts of justice. They are predators, yes, but they are predators who chose to be more." Prism's lights pulsed with understanding, and we are prey who never had to make that choice. We evolved in paradise and called it enlightenment. Perhaps we were simply fortunate. What do we do now, Elder? When this is over, what becomes of us? Prism looked at the human Marines, at the warriors who had saved his species. "We learn, young one. We learn that peace is not the absence of the capacity for violence. Peace is the choice to not use that capacity unless necessary. The humans understand this. Perhaps it is time we did as well." The medical bay aboard the Retribution was working beyond capacity. Human medics moved between beds treating both their own wounded and the rescued Luminari. Dr. Amara Osei worked alongside them, her xenobiology expertise crucial for understanding how to treat crystalline physiology. She found it darkly ironic that humanity's first real act of cooperation with the Luminari was patching up the survivors of a massacre. A luminary physician named Clarity worked beside her, his light patterns dim with exhaustion. His people had medical knowledge, but it was all theoretical. They had not treated violence-related injuries in thousands of years. Now he was learning battlefield medicine from a species the galaxy considered barbaric. "This one's light is fading," Clarity said, his patterns flickering with distress. "I do not know how to help." Amara examined the patient, a Luminari elder whose crystalline structure had been damaged by Ravager extraction equipment. "We need to stabilize his energy matrix. Can you modulate light frequencies to match his natural resonance?" Clarity stared at her. "How did you know that would work? Your species is carbon-based. You should not understand our biology. We spent the whole trip here studying everything we could about your people," Amara explained as they worked. "When we commit to helping someone, we do it properly." Together, human and Luminari physicians worked through the night, saving lives that would have been lost. It was a partnership born from necessity, but Clarity found himself respecting these strange predators. They were meticulous, dedicated, and genuinely cared about their patients regardless of species. On the planet's surface, reconstruction efforts were beginning. Human engineers worked alongside Luminari builders, clearing debris and repairing critical infrastructure. Radiance had volunteered to serve as a liaison, helping translate not just language but also concepts between the two species. She watched a human engineering team set up a portable power generator to restore electricity to a damaged district. Their equipment was robust, over-engineered, designed with redundant systems. It was so different from Luminari technology, which was elegant and efficient but fragile. "Why do you build everything with backups?" Radiance asked the team's leader, a gruff woman named Sandra Kowalski. "Because things break," Kowalski replied, checking power connections. Earth taught us that if something can fail, it will fail, usually at the worst possible time. So we plan for failure and build accordingly. That seems pessimistic. It's realistic. Your people built for an ideal world. We built for the world we actually live in. Neither approach is wrong, but only one works when things go bad. Radiance watched them finish the installation and power up the generator. Lights came on across the district, and she heard the collective sigh of relief from her people. The humans made it look easy, but she was beginning to understand the expertise behind their casual competence. "Can you teach me?" she asked suddenly. "How to build things that survive damage." Kowalski looked surprised. "You want to learn human engineering? I want to learn how to protect my people. You build things that last, that endure. We need to learn that." The human engineer smiled. "All right, kid. First lesson, always assume the worst and build for it. Second lesson, redundancy is your friend. Third lesson, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing." In orbit, Admiral Holt faced a different kind of challenge. A Galactic Council vessel had arrived. A sleek diplomatic ship that made even the Retribution look crude by comparison. The Council representative, an avian species named Ambassador Quill, demanded immediate communication. Holt sat in her command chair, Captain Reeves standing beside her, as the ambassador's hologram appeared before them. Quill was an impressive being, covered in iridescent feathers that shifted colors with his mood. Right now those colors indicated displeasure. "Admiral Holt, I must formally protest the unauthorized presence of human military forces in this system," Quill began, his translator rendering his chirps and whistles into clipped English. "Humanity does not have authority to intervene in Galactic Council affairs." The luminary sent a distress call, Holt replied calmly. We responded. "That's not intervention, Ambassador. That's basic decency. The Council had already dispatched appropriate assistance. Your presence was not required and is not welcome. Your assistance was 47 days away. The luminary would have been extinct by then." "How is that appropriate?" Quill's feathers ruffled with irritation. "That is not the point. There are protocols, procedures, proper channels for these matters. Humanity is on probationary status with the Galactic Assembly. This violation could result in your species being barred from galactic affairs entirely." Reeves stepped forward. "Ambassador, with all due respect, there are 70 million Luminari alive right now who would be dead if we had followed your protocols. Are you seriously suggesting we should have let them die to preserve bureaucratic procedure? I am suggesting that there are reasons for these protocols. The galaxy has rules, Captain. Civilization requires order." "Civilization requires protecting the innocent," Holt said quietly. "Everything else is just paperwork." The conversation was interrupted by a transmission from Oriel's surface. Elder Prism's image appeared, his crystalline form pulsing with determined light patterns. "Ambassador Quill, I must speak," Prism said. "The Galactic Council did not save my people. Humanity did. They came when we called. They fought when we could not. They bled for us, and now you arrive, days late, to criticize them for doing what the Council should have done." Quill's feathers shifted to more subdued colors. "Elder Prism, you must understand the political complexities. I understand that my people are alive because humans ignored your politics." Prism interrupted. "I understand that we have been naive, believing our enlightenment made us superior. We evolved beyond violence, yes, but we also evolved beyond the ability to defend ourselves. We became dependent on others to protect us. That is not enlightenment. That is helplessness." "What are you saying, Elder?" Prism's lights pulsed with resolve. "I am formally requesting that humanity be recognized as the protectorate species for Oriel. We trust them. They have earned that trust with their actions." The statement sent shockwaves through the diplomatic channels. A Galactic Council species requesting protection from humanity. The Deathworlders, the species everyone feared. It was unprecedented. Ambassador Quill struggled to respond. "This is highly irregular. The Council must deliberate on such matters." "There are procedures." "Then deliberate," Prism said firmly. "But the humans stay until you do. We will not be left defenseless again." The transmission ended. Holt allowed herself a small smile. The Luminari were learning quickly. But the political maneuvering became irrelevant when the tactical alarm sounded. Lieutenant Commander Russo's voice was urgent. "Admiral, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive Ravager fleet assembling at the system's edge. 15 capital ships, hundreds of support craft. They're preparing for a major assault." Holt felt her stomach sink. The Ravagers had been probing, testing. Now they were committing their full force. Her fleet was damaged, running low on supplies, exhausted from days of continuous combat. They could not win a direct engagement against those numbers. "Get me Earth Command," she ordered. Priority 1. The connection took several minutes to establish across the vast distances. When Admiral James Harrison's face appeared on screen, he looked grim. "Rebecca, I've been following your situation. The Council is pushing for your immediate withdrawal. Sir, the Ravagers are preparing a final assault. If we leave now, the Luminari die. All of them. I know. I've reviewed your tactical reports. You can't win this, Rebecca. Not with what you have. Then send reinforcements. The Second Fleet could be here in 8 days. You'd be overrun in hours." Harrison paused, then continued more gently. "You did good work there, Admiral. You saved millions of lives. But there's a point where courage becomes suicide. Bring your people home." Holt looked around her bridge. Her crew was watching her, waiting for orders. They were Earth's finest, veterans who had followed her into impossible situations before. But this was different. This was a no-win scenario. "Sir, request permission to stay and continue operations." Harrison's expression hardened. "That's an order, Admiral. Withdraw immediately. That's final." "Understood, sir. Permission to speak freely?" "Granted." "With all due respect, Admiral, that's a terrible order and I'm going to ignore it." Harrison actually smiled slightly. "I thought you might say that. For the record, I'm ordering you to withdraw. When you refuse and face a court-martial, I'll testify that you acted in the finest traditions of Earth's military service." "Holt, give them hell." The connection ended. Holt turned to her crew. "You all heard that. I just committed career suicide and probably actual suicide. Anyone who wants to follow orders and withdraw, I'll arrange transport on the Council ship. No judgment, no consequences. You signed up to serve Earth, not follow a crazy admiral on a suicide mission." Nobody moved. Not a single person. Captain Reeves spoke for all of them. "We're with you, Admiral. All the way." On the planet's surface, word spread quickly about the incoming Ravager fleet. Panic rippled through the Luminari population. They had just started to hope, just started to believe they might survive. Now that hope was being crushed. But something unexpected happened. The younger Luminari, those who had witnessed human courage firsthand, began to organize. Radiance stood before a crowd of her peers in the ruins of the Crystal Gardens. "The humans are going to fight," she announced, her lights pulsing with determination. "They are going to stand between us and the Ravagers even though they are outnumbered. They are going to die defending us. Then we should flee," someone called out. "Hide in the deep caverns until it is over. And let them die alone?" Radiance's lights flashed with anger, an emotion Luminari rarely experienced. "For 10,000 years we have prided ourselves on being enlightened. We claimed moral superiority because we rejected violence. But what have we actually done? We created beauty while others bled to protect us. We philosophized about peace while other species fought to preserve it. We are not enlightened. We are cowards." The crowd pulsed with shocked light patterns. Elder Prism, who had been listening, approached slowly. "Radiance speaks truth," he said quietly. "Painful truth. We have been prey pretending to be above the struggle between predator and prey. But there is a third option. We can be neither prey nor predator. We can be guardians of our own fate. But we cannot fight," Clarity protested. "Our biology, our neural structure, it prevents us from initiating violence," No, Prism interrupted. "But the humans have taught me something. Defense is not the same as aggression. Protection is not the same as conquest. Perhaps our evolution did not remove our ability to defend. Perhaps we simply never needed to learn how." Sergeant Ann Foster had been listening from nearby. She approached the gathered Luminari carefully. "Elder, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "Teach us," Prism said. "We cannot become warriors in a few hours. But perhaps we can learn to defend our homes, to operate systems, to support those who fight for us. Teach us how to protect ourselves." Anne looked at Radiance, at the young Luminari's determined light patterns. She thought about everything she had seen, everything they had been through. Then she smiled. "All right, let's start with basics. Who here wants to learn how to operate a defensive turret?" Hundreds of crystalline hands rose toward the sky. The Ravager armada emerged from faster-than-light travel like a swarm of locusts descending on a field. 15 massive hive ships, each one larger than the Retribution, accompanied by hundreds of smaller attack craft. Their biomechanical hulls pulsed with malevolent energy as they positioned themselves around Oriole. This was not a raid anymore. This was extermination. Admiral Holt stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched the enemy fleet assemble. Her tactical officers were frantically calculating firing solutions, but the mathematics were brutal. The human fleet was outnumbered 5-1 in capital ships, 10-1 in smaller craft. They were low on ammunition, low on fuel, and exhausted from days of continuous combat. "Final ammunition count?" she asked quietly. Lieutenant Commander Russo delivered the grim news. "Missile stocks at 23%. Energy weapons can sustain maybe 2 hours of continuous fire before we need to shut down and recharge. Point defense systems are at 40% capacity. And our people? Tired but ready," Holt nodded. She had asked her crew to follow her into the jaws of death, and not one had hesitated. Now she would lead them into their final battle. "All ships battle stations. Formation Delta 7. We're going to make them pay for every meter." On Oriole's surface, Ann Foster watched the sky fill with enemy ships. She had trained Luminary volunteers for exactly 4 hours. It was not nearly enough time to turn pacifists into soldiers, but it was what they had. Radiance stood beside her, operating a defensive turret with shaking crystalline hands. "I am frightened," Radiance admitted, her light patterns flickering with barely controlled panic. "Good," Ann said. "Fear keeps you alert. It's what you do with that fear that matters. You can let it freeze you, or you can use it to protect what you love." Around them, other Luminari manned defensive positions throughout Luminas. They did not know proper tactics or combat doctrine, but they knew their homes were behind them, and that would have to be enough. The Ravager fleet began their assault with overwhelming force. Attack craft descended toward the planet in waves while the capital ships engaged the human fleet in orbit. Space erupted with weapons fire, missiles crossing the void like shooting stars, energy beams cutting through the darkness. Wing Commander Patricia Hayes led her depleted fighter squadron into the maelstrom. She had 34 fighters left from an original complement of 60. Facing them were hundreds of Ravager craft. "Stay tight, stay smart," she transmitted to her pilots. "We can't match their numbers, so we outfly them. Make every shot count." Her fighters dove into the enemy formation like hawks among crows. The Ravagers had numbers, but humans had desperation and skill honed through countless battles. Hayes destroyed 3 enemy craft in rapid succession, her weapons finding weak points with practiced precision. But the sheer weight of numbers began to tell. Human fighters fell one by one. Hayes watched her pilots die and kept fighting because that was all she could do. The Retribution shuddered under repeated impacts. Ravager plasma weapons hammered at her shields while bioorganic missiles sought weak points in her armor. Captain Reeves coordinated the defense, routing power to damaged sections, directing damage control teams to critical areas. "Hull breach on Deck 7, came the report. "Sealing now." "Fire control reports missile tubes 3 and 4 are offline. Engineering says we're down to 60% reactor output." The reports kept coming, each one worse than the last. The Retribution was dying by inches, but she kept fighting. Her weapons carved into Ravager ships, destroying 2 of the smaller hive vessels. But it was not enough. On the planet, the first wave of Ravager ground forces landed on the outskirts of Luminas. Ann's defensive line held for the first assault. Human Marines and their Luminari volunteers working together. Radiance fired her turret with trembling determination, the weapon's recoil jarring her crystalline body. She hit more than she missed, and that was all anyone could ask. But the second wave broke through. Ravager ground troops poured into the city streets. Ann's squad fell back to the refugee center, fighting a running battle through the crystal buildings. Corporal Martinez went down, a plasma round burning through his armor. Private Chen dragged him to cover while Ann and the others provided covering fire. "We can't hold much longer," Chen shouted over the sounds of battle. "We hold as long as we need to," Ann replied, reloading her weapon. Behind them, thousands of Luminari civilians huddled in the refugee center, counting on them for protection. Failure was not an option. In orbit, Ambassador Quill watched the battle from his diplomatic vessel, horrified by the carnage. The Galactic Council ship was equipped with powerful shields but no weapons. They could observe but not intervene. He had spent his career believing in the superiority of civilized discourse over barbaric violence. Now he watched as that philosophy crumbled before reality. Why do they keep fighting? His aide asked, watching human ships continue to engage despite terrible damage. They cannot win. Why do they not retreat? Quill watched a human destroyer explode, her crew dying to buy seconds of time for the planet below. He watched fighters throw themselves at impossible odds. He watched the Retribution, burning and broken, position herself between the Ravager fleet and Oriel. Because they are insane, he whispered, and perhaps that is what the galaxy needs. Not sanity, not reason, but beings crazy enough to stand when any rational creature would flee. Admiral Holt knew the end was near. The Retribution had taken catastrophic damage. Her escort vessels were gone, destroyed, or disabled. The fighter wings were down to single digits. The Ravagers were preparing their final push, gathering for one overwhelming strike that would crush the last human resistance and consume Oriel. She opened a channel to all remaining human forces. "This is Admiral Holt, I won't lie to you. We're done. We gave everything we had and it wasn't enough. But I want every one of you to know something. We came here for the right reasons. We fought for something that mattered. And because of us, millions of people got to live a little longer. That's not failure. That's what being human means." Captain Reeves stood beside her, his uniform torn and bloodstained. "Admiral, we could attempt to evacuate, save who we can, and leave the Luminary to die. That's not who we are, David. We stay, we fight. We go down swinging." The Ravager fleet began their final approach. This was it, the last stand. Then something impossible happened. The space around Oriel lit up with new faster-than-light signatures. Massive ones. A voice crackled over the communication channels, speaking in heavily accented English. "Human vessel Retribution. This is the Galactic Defense Coalition. We are here to assist." Holt stared at her tactical display in shock. Ships were appearing all around the system. Not Council diplomatic vessels, but warships. Real military craft from a dozen different species. The Coalition had come. Ambassador Quill was equally stunned. This cannot be. The Council did not authorize military intervention. His aide checked the incoming data. "Ambassador, these ships are not Council vessels. They are independent response from individual species. The reports of humanity's stand have spread across the galaxy. They came on their own." The Coalition fleet smashed into the Ravager armada like a hammer. Fresh ships with full weapons and shields tore through the exhausted Ravager forces. The battle's momentum shifted in seconds. On Oriel's surface, Anne watched Ravager forces suddenly pull back, called to defend their ships in orbit. The pressure on her position eased. Chen laughed with exhausted relief. "We're not dead." "Why aren't we dead?" "Because apparently the galaxy has a conscience after all," Anne replied, hardly believing it herself. The battle raged for another 3 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Ravager fleet was shattered, their ships destroyed or fleeing into faster-than-light travel. The crisis was over. In the aftermath, Admiral Holt met with the Coalition commanders. They were a diverse group representing species she had never encountered before. A reptilian commander named Scalebright spoke for them. "We came because we heard what you did. A species barely in space, risking everything for strangers. That is true civilization. That is what the galaxy should be." "We just did what was right," Holt said tiredly. "Exactly, and it shamed us. The Council talks about civilization while you live it. We will not make that mistake again." The human casualties were devastating. 300 dead, twice that wounded. The Retribution would need months of repairs. But Oriel was saved. 20 million Luminari survived because humanity had said no to darkness. Elder Prism stood in the ruins of Luminous and watched human and Coalition ships orbit his world. Dr. Amara Osi stood beside him, both of them exhausted beyond measure. "Your species paid a terrible price for us," Prism said, his lights dim with sorrow. "That's what Guardians do," Amara replied. "We protect. Sometimes it costs us, but it's worth it. We have been naive. We thought evolution beyond violence meant we were superior, but we were simply fortunate. We never faced the choice between our principles and our survival. You face that choice every day and somehow remain decent beings." "We're not perfect," Amara said. "We struggle. We fail sometimes. But we try. That's all anyone can do." In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council was forced to acknowledge what had happened. Humanity's intervention, though unauthorized, had saved an entire species. The coalition that had responded independently became a new political force, one that valued action over bureaucracy. The Luminari made their choice official. They requested humanity as their protector species, and this time the Council could not refuse. But more importantly, they began learning from their new allies, not how to make war but how to protect peace. Radiance became humanity's primary liaison, working with human engineers and soldiers to develop Oriel's defenses. The Luminari would never be warriors like humans, but they could learn to defend themselves with human guidance. Anne Foster remained on Oriel for 6 months, training Luminari volunteers in defensive tactics. On her last day before returning to Earth, Radiance approached her in the rebuilt Crystal Gardens. "Thank you," the young Luminari said, "for teaching us that strength and compassion can coexist." "You already knew that," Anne replied. "You just needed someone to show you how." The memorial was constructed in the center of Luminas, a fusion of Luminari crystal and human metal. It honored both species fallen, their names etched in light and steel. The inscription was visible from space, a message to the entire galaxy. When darkness called, the predators answered. And we learned that fangs can guard as well as tear. Admiral Holt stood before the memorial during its dedication, her career somehow intact after intense political maneuvering. Elder Prism stood beside her, his light pattern steady and strong. "What you did here changed the galaxy," Prism said. "Species are rethinking what civilization means. The Council's authority is being questioned. You started a revolution." "We just helped some people who needed it," Holt replied. "Exactly. And that simple act revealed a profound truth. True civilization is not the absence of the capacity for violence. It is the choice to use that capacity only in defense of the innocent. Your species understands this instinctively. We had to learn it through pain." Holt looked at the memorial, at the names of her people who had died so far from home. "Was it worth it?" she asked quietly. 20 million Luminari are alive to ask that question because of you," Prism replied. "Yes, Admiral. It was worth it." Months later, back on Earth, Anne Foster sat in a quiet bar with what remained of her squad. They had medals now, commendations, recognition. But they did not talk about the awards. They talked about the people they saved, the Luminari they protected, the choice they made to stand when any sane person would have run. "Do you think they'll be okay?" Chen asked. "The Luminari." "Yeah," Anne said. "They're tougher than they look. And they're learning. Give them a few generations and they'll be able to protect themselves." "And us?" Martinez asked. "What are we?" Anne smiled. "We're human. We're the crazy ones who run toward the danger instead of away from it. We're the species that said the galaxy needed guardians, and then became those guardians whether anyone asked us to or not." "That's insane," Chen said. "Yeah," Anne agreed. "But someone has to be." Across the galaxy in council chambers and military academies, diplomats and soldiers studied what happened at Oriel. Some saw it as a cautionary tale about unauthorized intervention. Others saw it as proof that the old ways needed to change. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity had announced themselves to the galaxy not as conquerors or explorers or traders. They announced themselves as protectors, as the species that would answer the call when darkness came. The Ravagers, what remained of them, fled to the darkest corners of known space. They had learned a terrible lesson. The galaxy had predators now. Predators who hunted predators. Predators who protected the prey. And somewhere in the depths of space, other species in trouble heard the story. They heard about the humans who came when everyone else was too late. They heard about the species that fought impossible odds to save strangers. And when new distress calls went out across the stars, they were addressed not to the Galactic Council, but to Earth. Because the galaxy had learned something profound. Sometimes when you cry for help, you don't need enlightened philosophers or cautious diplomats. Sometimes you need monsters on your side. Sometimes you need predators who chose to guard instead of hunt. Sometimes you need humanity. And humanity in all its violent, compassionate, insane glory would always answer the call. The emergency beacon cut through subspace like a scream in the dark. Every human ship within 3 light years heard it at the same moment. A desperate pulse of data that spelled out one simple truth. New Perth was dying. Diana Ross felt the vibration through the deck plates before the alarm even sounded. She had been reviewing supply reports in her quarters when the ship itself seemed to shudder with the weight of that distant cry for help. By the time she reached the command center, her crew was already moving with practiced efficiency. "Talk to me," she said, gripping the rail that overlooked the tactical displays. Paul Grant looked up from his station, his face tight with controlled anger. New Perth colony, ma'am. Population 42,000. They're under attack by an alien fleet. 27 warships in orbit, bombardment in progress. Diana's jaw clenched. New Perth was a mining colony, peaceful families extracting rare minerals from a resource-rich moon. They had no military presence, no weapons capable of fighting off a single raider ship, let alone a fleet. Who's attacking them? She asked. They call themselves the Halcyon Dominion, Amy Lou said from the science station. Her fingers danced across holographic displays, pulling up what little data Earth's diplomatic corps had on the species. First contact was 8 months ago. They didn't seem hostile then. Apparently things have changed. Diana studied the alien ships on the screen. They were elegant things, all smooth curves and gleaming metal, beautiful in the way that dangerous creatures often were. The design suggested a species that valued aesthetics over function, form over substance. That might be useful. Distance to New Perth? Diana asked. 4 hours at maximum burn, said Ryan Webb, the tactical officer. He was young but sharp, promoted because he could think 3 moves ahead in any fight. But ma'am, we're 5 ships against 27. The math doesn't look good. The math never looks good, Diana replied. She activated the ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the captain. We have received a distress call from New Perth colony. Civilian population under direct attack. We are the only fleet in range to respond. I know we're outnumbered. I know this could be suicide. But those are our people down there, and I will not abandon them to die. Battle stations. Engineering, I need everything you've got. Helm, plot the fastest course you can manage. I don't care if the acceleration kills us, we need to get there now. The crew responded without hesitation. They were Deathworlders, after all. Every human in the fleet had grown up under Earth's crushing gravity, breathing air that would poison most alien species, surviving weather patterns that could kill in minutes. They were descendants of predators who had clawed their way to the top of the food chain on a planet that seemed designed to destroy them. A little high-G acceleration was nothing. The 5 destroyers of Diana's fleet burned hard toward New Perth. Inside the ships, crews strapped themselves into reinforced seats and prepared for maneuvers that would liquefy the organs of most galactic species. Humans had learned long ago that their bodies could take punishment that seemed impossible. Bones that evolved to support weight under heavy gravity didn't break easily. Hearts that pumped blood against that constant pull were strong enough to keep working, even when acceleration pressed them backward. Evolution had made them into something the galaxy wasn't prepared for. As they accelerated, more data came through from New Perth. The transmissions were broken, interrupted by weapons fire and failing power systems. Diana listened to the voices of colonists huddling in shelters, saying goodbye to loved ones, recording final messages for families they would never see again. She listened to the cold mechanical voice of the Halcyon commander, offering terms of surrender. You have 1 hour to submit to Dominion authority, the alien said. Refuse and your colony will be reduced to ash. Your species is unknown to us, but your resistance is meaningless. We have conquered 47 worlds. You are simply the 48th. Diana's hands formed fists. The Halcyon saw humans as just another weak species to be crushed and absorbed. They had no idea what they had provoked. Ma'am, we're getting another transmission, Paul said. It's from the Halcyon fleet. They're responding to New Perth's distress call. Put it through, Diana ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was filled with amusement, the kind of casual cruelty that came from absolute certainty of victory. Your call for help has been received and denied. No one is coming to save you. Submit or perish. These are the only choices you will receive. The transmission ended. Diana looked at the faces of her crew, saw the cold fury in their eyes. Humans didn't do well with threats. Thousands of years of history had proven that when humanity was backed into a corner, when they were told to submit or die, they usually chose a third option. Fight back so hard that the enemy regretted ever making the threat. How long until we reach New Perth? Diana asked. 3 hours, 40 minutes, Beth Cole replied from the helm. The young pilot's hands were steady on the controls, guiding their ship through space at speeds that made the hull groan with stress. When we arrive, I want a full assault pattern, Diana said. Target their capital ships first. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we make them bleed for every second they spend in our territory. Ma'am, the Halcyon have replied to our approach, Amy said. They're ordering us to halt and withdraw. They say 5 ships against their fleet is suicide. Diana smiled without humor. Send them a message. Tell them we received their reply to New Perth's distress call. Tell them we're sending it back to them. In flames. The fleet burned onward through the dark, 5 small ships racing to face an empire that had never known defeat. Behind them, Earth spun in the black, a blue marble of a planet that had forged its children in fire and ice and endless struggle. Ahead, an alien fleet waited, confident and unsuspecting. They would learn, Diana thought. They would learn what it meant to threaten a Deathworlder colony. The Halcyon Dominion had crossed a line, and humanity was about to teach them the cost of that mistake. 3 hours into their burn, the human fleet was doing things that should have been impossible. Physics had rules about how fast ships could accelerate, how many G-forces a crew could endure before organs failed and bones shattered. The Halcyon knew these rules well. Their ships were marvels of automated efficiency, with crews in protective gel pods that absorbed the stress of combat. Maneuvers. What the Halcyon didn't know was that humans didn't care much for rules. Admiral Tresh of the Halcyon fleet watched his sensors with growing confusion. The 5 human ships approaching New Perth were accelerating at rates that should have killed everyone aboard. His science officer had run the calculations 3 times, certain there must be an error in the readings. "Commander, those readings cannot be correct," the science officer said. His bioluminescent skin flickered with colors that indicated distress. "The human vessels are pulling 8 standard gravities. No biological crew could survive that without stasis technology." Tresh studied the display. "Perhaps they are drone ships. Automated weapons platforms." "No, sir. We're detecting life signs, biological signatures consistent with the human profile we recorded during first contact. They have crews aboard." "Living crews." A chill ran through Tresh's primary nerve cluster. He had conquered many worlds, faced many species, but he had never encountered anyone mad enough to crew their ships during such brutal acceleration. "What kind of species are they?" His science officer pulled up the first contact files. "Their homeworld is classified as a death planet, sir. Heavy gravity, toxic atmosphere composition, extreme temperature variations, violent weather systems. By Dominion standards, it should not support complex life. And yet they evolved there. They thrived there." Tresh felt something he rarely experienced: doubt. The Dominion conquered through overwhelming force and superior technology. They had never needed to be tough because their weapons were efficient enough that toughness didn't matter. Now he was facing a species that had been forged in conditions that would kill most Halcyon in minutes. Aboard the USS Relentless, Diana moved through the ship, checking on her crew. The acceleration pressed against her like a heavy weight, but it was a familiar sensation. Every human grew up under Earth's gravity, carrying their own body weight every moment of every day. Muscles and bones adapted to constant strain. Hearts learned to pump harder. Even now, under crushing acceleration, her crew worked their stations with steady hands. She found Ryan Webb at Tactical, his eyes locked on targeting displays. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his fingers didn't shake as he programmed firing solutions. "How are you holding up?" Diana asked. Ryan glanced at her and managed a tight smile. "Feels like my first day at the academy, ma'am. Running the obstacle course with a full pack. Terrible at the time, but I survived it. I'll survive this." That was the human way, Diana thought. Everything that didn't kill them made them stronger. Earth had tried to kill humanity for millions of years with ice ages, plagues, predators, volcanic eruptions, meteor strikes, and 1,000 other catastrophes. Each time humans adapted, learned, and came back harder to beat. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Halcyon fleet," Paul said. "Admiral Tresh wants to negotiate." Diana raised an eyebrow. "We're still 2 hours out and they already want to talk?" "Put him through." The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of Admiral Tresh. He was a tall creature, vaguely humanoid, but with skin that glowed with soft colors. His face was elegant, refined, the face of a species that had never known true hardship. "Human Commander," Tresh said, "I am Admiral Tresh of the Halcyon Dominion. Your approach is noted. However, I must warn you that continuing on your current course would be unwise. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Withdraw now, and we will consider this incident closed." Diana studied him for a long moment. "Admiral Tresh, I am Captain Diana Ross. You attacked a civilian colony under human protection. You murdered civilians who had no way to defend themselves. And now you want me to withdraw?" "The colony refused to submit to Dominion authority," Tresh replied. His color shifted to something that might have been irritation. "Their defiance required correction. This is standard protocol. Standard protocol, Diana repeated softly. Let me tell you about human protocol, Admiral. When someone attacks our people, we don't negotiate. We don't withdraw. We come for you with everything we have, and we don't stop until either you're gone or we are. That's how we survived on Earth. That's how we've survived everything the universe has thrown at us, and that's what's coming for you right now. Tresh's colors flickered rapidly. You have 5 ships against 27. Your bravery is noted, but ultimately meaningless. Mathematics does not favor courage. You'd be surprised what humans can do when the math doesn't favor us, Diana said. We walked on our moon before we had computers. We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We survived ice ages with nothing but sharp rocks and fire. We don't need the math to favor us. We just need a reason to fight, and Admiral, you just gave us the best reason there is. She cut the transmission. Paul looked at her with something like awe. Ma'am, that was either the bravest or the most insane thing I've ever heard, he said. Probably both, Diana replied. But he needed to know what he's facing. The Halcyon think we're just another weak species to push around. They need to understand that humans are different. The fleet continued its burn. In the cargo holds, Marines prepared weapons and checked armor. In engineering, Sam Torres pushed the reactors beyond their rated capacity, coaxing more power from systems that were already screaming with stress. Throughout the ships, humans prepared for battle with the calm efficiency of a species that had been fighting since the dawn of time. Beth Cole adjusted their approach vector, plotting a course that would bring them into the Halcyon fleet at maximum velocity. Standard military doctrine said you slowed down before engaging, gave yourself time to maneuver and adjust to enemy tactics. Human doctrine, formed through centuries of warfare on Earth, said something different. Hit them so hard and so fast they never have time to recover. 1 hour to New Perth, Beth announced. Halcyon fleet is holding position in orbit. Their shields are up, but they're not moving to intercept us. They think we'll slow down, Ryan said. They think we'll follow normal engagement protocols. Diana smiled. Then let's show them what happens when you fight a species that never learned to follow the rules. All ships prepare for combat. No retreat, no surrender. We're going to send their SOS back to them in flames, just like we promised. The 5 human ships burned through space toward New Perth, toward an enemy that outnumbered them 5-1, toward a battle that every tactical computer said they couldn't win. But humans had never been good at accepting what computers told them was impossible. They were a species of dreamers and fighters, builders and destroyers, survivors who refused to die even when death seemed certain. The Halcyon Dominion was about to learn what that meant. New Perth burned below them as the human fleet dropped out of their acceleration burn. The planet's dayside glowed with fires where Halcyon weapons had struck civilian structures. From orbit, Diana could see the scars of bombardment, craters where homes and schools and hospitals had stood hours before. The Halcyon fleet hung in a defensive formation around the planet, their ships gleaming in the light of the local star. They were beautiful vessels, built by a species that valued elegance. Each ship was a work of art, with flowing lines and perfect symmetry. They looked like they belonged in a museum, not a battlefield. That was going to be a problem for them. All ships, this is Ross, Diana transmitted to her small fleet. Target their capital ships first. I want firing solutions on their flagship and the 2 heavy cruisers flanking it. We're going in fast and we're going in hard. Make every shot count. The 5 human destroyers dropped into attack formation. They were ugly ships compared to the Halcyon fleet, blocky and functional, built for one purpose: war. Earth's shipyards didn't waste time on aesthetics. Every plate of armor served a purpose. Every weapon system was designed for maximum damage. Every system had 3 backups because human engineers knew that in combat, everything broke eventually. Admiral Tresh watched the human approach with confusion. They weren't slowing down. They weren't adjusting their formation for a cautious engagement. They were diving straight into his fleet like madmen, their weapons already charging for first strike. All ships, defensive formation, he ordered. Prepare to engage. Target the lead vessel. The Halcyon fleet moved with practiced precision, automated systems adjusting shield frequencies and weapon targeting in perfect synchronization. It was the kind of coordinated response that came from superior technology and centuries of easy victories. Then the humans opened fire. Diana's ship, the Relentless, led the charge. Its main railgun fired a solid slug of tungsten at a fraction of light speed. The projectile crossed the distance between fleets in seconds and slammed into the shields of the Halcyon flagship. The shield held but barely, flickering with the impact of kinetic energy that the Halcyon had never encountered before. Again, Diana ordered. Pour it on. The human fleet fired in sequence, railguns and missiles and laser batteries all focusing on the same targets. The Halcyon had energy weapons, elegant beams of contained plasma that could slice through conventional armor with ease. What they didn't have was experience fighting an enemy that used primitive kinetic weapons. Tungsten didn't care about shield frequencies or energy-dampening fields. It just hit and kept hitting until something broke. The flagship's shields collapsed under the third salvo. The fourth went straight through its hull, punching holes that vented atmosphere and crew into space. Emergency systems kicked in, automated bulkheads sealing sections, but the damage was done. The Halcyon flagship was crippled in the first minute of combat. Tresh stared at his displays in shock. How? How did they penetrate our shields so easily? Admiral, they're using solid projectiles, his tactical officer reported. Our shields are optimized against energy weapons. Kinetic impacts at those velocities are exceeding our defensive parameters. Adjust shield frequencies. Compensate for kinetic weapons. Sir, our automated systems aren't programmed for this type of threat. It will take time to recalibrate. Time was something Tresh didn't have. The human ships were already among his fleet, moving with impossible agility. They dodged and weaved through weapons fire like fighters instead of capital ships. Their pilots making split-second decisions that no automated system could match. Beth Cole flew the Relentless like she was born to it. She had grown up flying crop dusters on Earth, small planes that had to navigate through storms and mountains and all the dangers that a death world could throw at them. She had reflexes trained by a lifetime of split-second decisions, instincts honed by a planet that killed the slow and the careless. Incoming fire. Port side, Ryan called out. I see it, Beth replied, already rolling the ship. The Halcyon plasma beam passed through space where they had been a second before. She brought them around in a tight arc that made the hull groan with stress, lined up on another Halcyon cruiser, and held position just long enough for Ryan to get a clean shot. The cruiser's engines exploded under the impact of their railgun. It began to drift, powerless and helpless. Throughout the human fleet, similar scenes played out. Where the Halcyon relied on automated systems and coordinated firing patterns, humans used instinct and experience. Every pilot had trained in Earth's atmosphere, where a mistake meant death. Every gunner had learned to shoot in conditions where targets moved unpredictably, and second chances didn't exist. Every engineer had learned to keep systems running with duct tape and prayer when proper parts weren't available. The Halcyon had technology. Humans had desperation and 5 million years of evolution that had trained them to survive against impossible odds. Captain, the colony is hailing us, Paul said. They're asking if we're really human ships or if they're hallucinating from lack of oxygen. Diana allowed herself a brief smile. Tell them rescue shuttles are on the way. We just need to clear out the trash first. The battle raged around New Perth. The Halcyon fleet, realizing they were taking heavy casualties, tried to regroup into a tighter defensive formation. It was a good tactical decision against most enemies. Against humans, it just meant the targets were closer together. Diana ordered a full missile barrage. Every ship in her fleet launched everything they had, dozens of missiles streaking toward the clustered Halcyon vessels. The aliens' point defense systems shot down most of them, brilliant explosions lighting up space like fireworks. But most wasn't all, and the ones that got through found targets. 3 more Halcyon ships went dark. The aliens were starting to panic now, their formation breaking apart as individual ships tried to flee. But human ships were faster, more maneuverable, and absolutely relentless. Ma'am, Halcyon reinforcements are entering the system, Amy reported. 12 more ships, heavy class. Diana's jaw tightened. They had hurt the Halcyon badly, but they couldn't fight an endless stream of reinforcements. Not without support of their own. How long until they reach us? She asked. 20 minutes at their current speed. 20 minutes. Diana looked at the tactical display, at her 5 ships and the remnants of the Halcyon fleet. They could run, retreat to human space, and call for backup. It was the smart tactical decision. It was what any sensible commander would do. But Diana looked at New Perth below, at the fires still burning, at the distress signals still coming from the surface. She thought about the colonists who had watched the Halcyon bombardment, and believed they were going to die. She thought about the Halcyon Admiral's mocking message telling them no one was coming to help. "All ships maintain engagement," Diana ordered. "We're not leaving until every civilian is evacuated. If those reinforcements want a fight, we'll give them one they won't forget." "Yes, ma'am," her crew responded, and Diana heard the pride in their voices. The human fleet fought on, 5 small ships against an empire, buying time for the helpless with their own blood and metal. It was madness by any logical standard. But logic had never been humanity's strong suit. What they had instead was stubbornness, courage, and an absolute refusal to abandon their own. Smoke filled sections of the Relentless as Diana pulled herself along the corridor toward engineering. An explosion had caught her on the command deck, throwing her against a bulkhead and leaving a gash across her forehead that bled into her eyes. She ignored it. The ship was still fighting, still flying, and that meant she had work to do. In engineering, Sam Torres was performing miracles. The chief engineer had half the power systems offline, 3 reactor cores running beyond their safety limits, and a hull breach in Section 7 that was venting atmosphere into space. None of that stopped him from keeping the ship in the fight. "Give me good news, Sam," Diana said as she entered engineering. Sam looked up from where he was literally holding 2 power conduits together with his bare hands, the connections too damaged to interface properly. His arms shook with the effort, but his voice was steady. "We're still alive, ma'am. I count that as good news. Can we keep fighting?" "Can we? Yes, should we?" "That's a different question." He nodded toward a display showing the ship's status. "We've got hull breaches in 4 sections. The primary weapons array is down to 40% capacity, and our shield generators are running on backup power. But the engines are good. The life support is holding, and I can keep the lights on for another few hours. After that, we're going to need a shipyard and about 6 months of repairs." Diana wiped blood from her eyes and studied the display. Around New Perth, the battle had turned into a brutal slugging match. The initial Halcyon fleet was shattered, with only 8 ships still combat-capable, but those reinforcements were getting closer every minute. "How many civilians have we evacuated?" she asked into her communication device. Paul's voice came back, strained but functional. 38,000 and counting. "The shuttles are making their last runs now. Another 10 minutes and we'll have everyone who survived the bombardment." 10 minutes. Diana looked at the tactical plot. The Halcyon reinforcements would arrive in 12 minutes. It was going to be close. "All ships, status report," she ordered. The responses came in one by one. Every ship in her fleet was damaged. The destroyer Defiant had lost its main engines and was fighting on maneuvering thrusters alone. The Valiant was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. The Thunder had taken a direct hit to its bridge and was operating from auxiliary control. The Storm was down to 20% weapons capacity. By any reasonable measure, they should have retreated hours ago. But reasonable had never been a word associated with human military doctrine. "Ma'am, we're getting a transmission," Amy said. "It's from the Halcyon High Chancellor himself. He's requesting to speak with you directly." Diana raised an eyebrow. The High Chancellor was the supreme leader of the Halcyon Dominion, ruler of 47 conquered worlds. For him to personally contact a human captain meant something had changed. "Put him through," she said. The holographic display activated, showing a Halcyon who glowed with colors that indicated age and authority. His face was rigid with barely controlled fury. "Human," he said, and the word dripped with venom. "I am High Chancellor Quinn of the Halcyon Dominion. You have destroyed 17 of our ships. You have humiliated our fleet. You have violated every principle of civilized warfare." Diana stared at him, blood still running down her face, standing in the ruins of her command deck. "You attacked a civilian colony. You murdered families. You told them no one was coming to help. And now you want to lecture me about civilized warfare? Your resistance is meaningless," Quinn continued. "Reinforcements are arriving. You cannot win. Surrender now and I will allow your crews to live as prisoners." "Let me tell you something about humans," Diana said softly. "We come from a planet that has tried to kill us since the day we climbed down from the trees. Ice ages, plagues, predators, storms that could level cities. We survived all of it. You know how? By refusing to quit, by fighting even when the fight seemed hopeless. By standing up every time we got knocked down and saying, 'Is that all you've got?'" She leaned closer to the display. "You attacked New Perth thinking we were just another weak species to conquer. You thought we'd roll over and submit, but we don't submit. We don't surrender, we fight, and we don't stop fighting until either we've won or we're all dead. So here's my answer to your surrender demand. Come and try to take us. Quinn's colors flashed through patterns that might have been rage or fear or both. You are insane. Your species is mad. Yeah, probably, Diana agreed. Earth does that to you. You evolve on a death world. You either go a little crazy or you go extinct. We chose crazy, and that's why you're going to lose this fight, Chancellor. Because you've never faced an enemy that was willing to die before giving up. You've conquered species that valued their lives more than their freedom. We're different. We'd rather burn than bow. She cut the transmission. Paul looked at her with something approaching awe. Captain, that might have been the most terrifying thing I've ever heard, he said. And I mean that as a compliment. It's the truth, Diana replied. Now let's make sure we back it up. How long until the last shuttles are clear? 6 minutes. The Halcyon reinforcements appeared on the edge of the system, 12 massive warships burning toward New Perth at maximum acceleration. They were fresh, undamaged, and they outnumbered Diana's battered fleet by more than 2 to 1. All ships prepare to engage, Diana ordered. We hold this line until the last civilian is safe. After that, we show these Halcyon what it means to fight a species that evolved to survive. The human fleet regrouped, 5 damaged ships forming a defensive line between the incoming Halcyon and the planet below. It was a suicide mission by any tactical analysis, but humans had made a career out of surviving suicide missions. Sam Torres managed to coax another 10% power from the reactors. Beth Cole plotted attack vectors that used the planet's gravity well for momentum. Ryan Webb programmed firing solutions that would maximize damage, even if they only got one shot. Throughout the fleet, crews worked with the calm efficiency of people who had accepted death and decided to make it expensive for the enemy. Last shuttle is away, Paul reported. All civilians are clear. Diana allowed herself a breath of relief. Whatever happened now, they had saved the people they came to save. That was worth dying for. New contacts entering the system, Amy suddenly called out. Multiple ships, human signatures. It's the Second Fleet, ma'am. Admiral Brooks is hailing us, Diana's heart leapt. The Second Fleet was 20 capital ships fresh from Earth and spoiling for a fight. The cavalry had arrived. Admiral Brooks's voice came through the communication system, gruff and amused. Captain Ross, this is Brooks. Heard you were having a party out here. Thought we'd drop by. Admiral, you have perfect timing, Diana replied. We've been monitoring your transmissions. That speech you gave the Halcyon Chancellor is going to become required study at the Academy. Brooks' tone turned serious. Your fleet is to withdraw for repairs. We'll take it from here. And Ross, you did good. Real good. The human Second Fleet swept past Diana's battered ships and crashed into the Halcyon reinforcements like a hammer. The aliens, already shaken by the ferocity of 5 damaged human ships, broke and ran when faced with 20 fresh ones. Diana watched them flee, watched the mighty Halcyon Dominion retreat from human space with their fleet in ruins. She thought about the mocking message they had sent to New Perth, about the certainty in their voices when they said no help was coming. They had been wrong. Help had come, and it had come with teeth. Admiral Diana Ross stood in the observation deck of the newly repaired Relentless, looking out at the fleet assembled around her. 2 weeks had passed since the Battle of New Perth. 2 weeks of repairs, reinforcements, and planning. The human military had spent that time preparing for something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity going on the offensive. The Halcyon Dominion controlled 47 worlds across 3 sectors of space. Their empire had been built on the assumption that superior technology and overwhelming numbers would always win. They had never encountered serious resistance because most species in the galaxy were peaceful, evolved on gentle worlds where cooperation was more valuable than conflict. They had made the mistake of attacking a species that came from Earth. All ships report ready, Paul said. He had been promoted to commander after the battle, a field promotion that everyone agreed was long overdue. We have 60 capital ships, 200 support vessels, and enough firepower to glass a continent. The Halcyon border systems are 2 hours away. Diana nodded. She had been given command of the offensive fleet, a responsibility that weighed heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't a defensive action anymore. They were taking the fight to the Halcyon, pushing into their territory, and that meant she had to be careful. Humanity could win this war, but they could also become the monsters they were fighting against if they weren't careful. Send a message to all ship commanders, she said. Rules of engagement are strict. Military targets only. No civilian casualties, no bombardment of population centers, no torture of prisoners. We're here to send a message, not to commit genocide. Anyone who violates these rules will face court-martial. Understood? Understood, ma'am, Paul replied. He sent the orders, and Diana saw acknowledgement signals lighting up from every ship in the fleet. The human fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, crossing the distance to Halcyon space in hours instead of weeks. They emerged at the border system of Refuge Station, a military outpost that controlled access to the inner Halcyon territories. The Halcyon garrison there saw them coming and immediately sent out a distress call. Diana let them. She wanted the Halcyon leadership to know what was coming. She wanted them to be afraid. The battle for Refuge Station lasted 6 hours. The Halcyon defenders fought bravely, but they were defending a fixed position against a mobile fleet. Diana's ships moved through the system like wolves, striking from unexpected angles, using tactics that no automated defense system could predict. When it was over, Refuge Station was a cloud of debris and the human fleet hadn't lost a single ship. Diana ordered the wreckage left in place, a monument to the Halcyon's mistake. They moved to the next system and the next, systematically dismantling every military installation along the Halcyon border. At each location, Diana broadcast the same message. This is what happens when you attack Deathworlders. This is the price of threatening humanity. Withdraw from human space, pay reparations for New Perth, and this ends. Refuse, and we keep coming. The Halcyon fleet tried to mount a defense at the fourth system. They had assembled a force of 80 ships, pulling vessels from garrison duties across their empire. It was the largest fleet they had committed to a single battle in decades. Diana's fleet tore through them in 3 hours. The problem, she realized as she watched another Halcyon ship explode, was that the Halcyon had never really learned to fight. They had technology, yes, and numbers, but they had no experience with real warfare. They relied on automated systems and careful tactics, fighting the way a chess player moved pieces on a board. Humans fought the way wolves hunted, with instinct and aggression and a willingness to take risks that terrified their enemies. After the fourth system fell, the Halcyon stopped trying to defend their border. Their ships simply retreated deeper into their territory, abandoning their outer colonies without a fight. Diana let them go. She wasn't here to conquer planets. She was here to make a point. Ma'am, we've captured Admiral Tresh, Ryan reported. His ship was disabled in the last engagement. He's requesting to speak with you. Diana considered refusing, then decided she wanted to hear what the Halcyon Admiral had to say. She had him brought to the observation deck under guard. Tresh looked diminished without his flagship, his colors pale and flickering with patterns that suggested fear and confusion. He stared at Diana for a long moment before speaking. Why are you doing this? He asked. You've won. You've proven your point. Why continue the destruction? Because you need to understand, Diana replied. You attacked New Perth thinking it would be easy. You thought humans were just another weak species to push around. You were wrong, and you need to know exactly how wrong you were so you never make that mistake again. We underestimated you, Tresh admitted. Your species is unlike anything we've encountered. But surely there can be peace. Surely we can negotiate an end to this. Diana walked to the window, looking out at the stars. You know what I learned about you from our intelligence reports? The Halcyon Dominion has conquered 47 worlds. 47 species that submitted rather than fight. You've spent so long beating up the weak that you forgot what happens when you pick a fight with someone who fights back. She turned to face him. Humans have been fighting for our entire existence. We fought the weather, the predators, the diseases, and each other. We fought ice ages and meteor strikes and volcanic winters. We nearly went extinct a dozen times, and every time we survived by fighting harder. That's what we are, Admiral. We're a species of survivors. And survival means we don't give up, we don't back down, and we sure as hell don't let anyone threaten our people without consequences. Tresh's colors shifted to something that might have been understanding. You're not going to stop until we surrender, are you? No, Diana said simply. We're not, because if we stop now, in 10 years or 20 years or 100 years, the Halcyon will rebuild and maybe they'll decide to try again. So we're going to make sure you understand, at a level so deep it becomes part of your culture, that humanity is not to be threatened. Ever. She gestured to the guards. Take him to the brig. Make sure he's comfortable. And send a message to High Chancellor Quinn. Tell him I want to negotiate terms. No more fighting, no more destruction, just terms. He has 24 hours to respond. The message was sent. The human fleet held position in the captured system, waiting. Diana knew that Quinn was desperate now, his empire crumbling, his military in ruins. He would agree to negotiate. He had no choice. 20 hours later, the response came. High Chancellor Quinn would meet with Diana at a neutral location to discuss terms. The war, it seemed, was almost over. Diana looked at her reflection in the window, at the blood and exhaustion and determination in her eyes. She thought about New Perth, about the families who had died in the bombardment, about the colonists who had believed no help was coming. "We sent your message back in flames," she whispered to the memory of the Halcyon's mocking transmission, "just like we promised." The neutral space station hung in the void between territories, a construct built by the Galactic Council for exactly this purpose. Peace talks between warring species. Diana had never been to Council space before. Humans were too new to the galactic community to have much interaction with the old powers. That was about to change. She walked through corridors filled with aliens from a dozen different species, all of them stopping to stare at her. Some looked curious, others fearful, a few with something that might have been respect. Word had spread quickly about the war between humanity and the Halcyon. A species that had seemed insignificant just months ago had defeated one of the galactic powers in a matter of weeks. The negotiation chamber was a vast room with a table that could seat 50 delegates. High Chancellor Quinn was already there, surrounded by advisors whose colors flickered with anxiety. Diana entered with only Paul and Amy beside her. She didn't need a large delegation. The results of the war spoke loudly enough. "Chancellor Quinn," Diana said, taking her seat across from him, "thank you for agreeing to meet." Quinn's colors were muted, showing none of the arrogance from their first conversation. "Captain Ross, or should I say Admiral Ross, I understand you've been promoted." "Admiral will do," Diana confirmed. "Let's discuss terms." "Before we begin," Quinn said, "I must ask, are all human commanders like you? Is your entire species so willing to die before surrendering?" Diana considered the question. "Most of us, yeah. It's a survival trait from Earth. You either develop stubborn determination or you die out. We're the descendants of the ones who were too stubborn to quit." An alien Diana didn't recognize spoke up from the side of the chamber. It was a crystalline being, refracting light in rainbow patterns. "I am Observer Len of the Galactic Council. I have been assigned to witness these negotiations." "May I ask a question?" "Go ahead," Diana said. "Your species evolved on what we classify as a Class 12 death world. Statistically, such worlds should not produce spacefaring civilizations. The resources required just to survive should prevent technological development. How did humanity reach the stars?" Diana smiled slightly. "You're asking how we had time to build spaceships when we were busy not dying? It's because of Earth, not despite it. Every challenge made us smarter, tougher, more creative. We learned to cooperate because lone humans died. We learned to innovate because the old ways stopped working. We learned to reach for the impossible because the possible wasn't enough to keep us alive." She leaned forward. "You want to know the real secret? Humans don't see obstacles as reasons to quit. We see them as problems to solve. You put a human in front of an impossible challenge, and instead of giving up, we start thinking, okay, how do we make this work? Well, it's why we walked on our moon before we had computers. It's why we built cities in deserts and jungles and Arctic wastes. And it's why the Halcyon couldn't beat us even with superior technology and numbers." Observer Len's crystalline form pulsed with light. "Fascinating. The Council will want detailed psychological studies of your species later," Diana said. "Right now, let's focus on ending this war." She turned back to Quinn. "Here are my terms. The Halcyon Dominion will pay full reparations for the damage to New Perth. That includes reconstruction costs and compensation for every life lost. Second, Halcyon military forces will withdraw from all systems within 50 light-years of human space. Third, the Dominion will formally recognize human sovereignty and independence. And fourth, you will release all records of other species you've conquered so we can verify they agreed to join your empire voluntarily." Quinn's colors flashed with indignation at the last point. "You question the legitimacy of our empire?" "Damn right I do," Diana replied. "You tried to force New Perth to submit. Makes me wonder how many of your other 47 worlds were given the same choice. Join or die. So yeah, we're going to check. And if we find out you've got species under your rule who want out, you're going to let them go. This is outrageous. You cannot dictate terms to the Dominion like some kind of conqueror. Diana's expression hardened. Chancellor, I have 60 warships in orbit around your border systems. I can have 300 more here within a week. My engineers are already planning assault routes to your core worlds. You want to see outrageous? Keep pushing and find out what humanity does when we really commit to a war. The chamber fell silent. Observer Len spoke quietly. Perhaps the Chancellor needs a moment to consult with his advisors. Quinn's colors cycled through patterns of frustration and resignation. Finally, he spoke. We accept your terms. The reparations will be paid. Our forces will withdraw and you may examine our records. But I want something in return. What? Diana asked. A non-aggression pact. The Dominion will not threaten human space again, and humanity will not expand into our territory. We coexist in peace with clear boundaries between our peoples. Diana considered this. It was reasonable and it gave both sides a way to save face. Agreed. But the pact includes a provision. If we find evidence that any of your member species wants independence, you grant it without violence. No punitive actions, no retaliation. They get to choose their own path. Quinn hesitated, then nodded. Acceptable. Though I warn you, you may be surprised by what you find. Many species appreciate the stability and protection the Dominion offers. Then they'll choose to stay and everyone's happy. Diana replied. But it has to be a choice, not a threat. The formal treaty was drafted over the next few hours, with observer Len ensuring that every clause was clear and binding. As Diana signed the document, she felt the weight of what they had accomplished. Humanity had gone from an unknown species to a galactic power in the span of weeks. There is one more thing, observer Len said. The Council would like to extend an invitation to humanity. We would like Earth to join the Galactic Council as a member species. Diana raised her eyebrows. That's quite an honor. What made you decide this? Frankly, you terrify us, Len said with what might have been amusement. A species capable of defeating the Halcyon with such efficiency is not one we want as an enemy. Better to bring you into the Council, give you a voice in galactic affairs, and hopefully channel your aggression toward productive ends. You're saying you want to make us part of the system so we'll protect it instead of breaking it, Paul observed. Precisely. Plus, there are situations where your unique perspective might be valuable. Problems that require the kind of stubborn determination and creative thinking that you mentioned. Diana looked at her companions. Amy was smiling. Paul was nodding thoughtfully. They were thinking the same thing she was. This was what they had fought for. Not just survival, but recognition. A place among the stars as equals. We'll take your offer back to Earth, Diana said. I think they'll accept, but the decision needs to come from our government, not from a military officer. Of course, Len agreed. Take all the time you need. 3 months later, Diana stood in the rebuilt town square of New Perth. The colony had been reconstructed. Better than before, with Halcyon reparations funding schools and hospitals and infrastructure. A memorial stood at the center of the square, listing the names of everyone who had died in the bombardment. She had come for the dedication ceremony, to honor the fallen and celebrate the survivors. As she stood before the memorial, a young girl approached her, maybe 8 years old. Are you Admiral Ross? The girl asked. I am, Diana replied, kneeling to meet the child's eyes. My dad says you saved us. He says when the bad aliens attacked, you came even though everyone said it was impossible. Diana felt her throat tighten. Your dad is right. We came because you needed help. Why? The girl asked with the simple directness of children. Why risk your life for people you didn't know? Diana thought about the question, about the long history of humanity fighting against impossible odds. Because that's what humans do, she said finally. We take care of our own. And everyone on New Perth, everyone in human space, they're our own. When someone threatens our people, we don't calculate the odds or worry about the cost. We just come running, ready to fight. The girl hugged her suddenly, fiercely. Diana hugged her back, thinking about all the children on New Perth who had survived because humanity refused to accept the impossible. Her communication device chimed. It was a message from Earth Command. Another colony, this one on the far edge of human space, was reporting unusual activity. Unidentified ships in orbit, demands for submission. Diana smiled grimly. It seemed the galaxy still had lessons to learn about threatening Deathworlders. I have to go, she told the girl. But I'll be back. and New Perth will be safe. You have my word. She walked back to her ship where her crew was already preparing for departure. Paul met her at the airlock. Another distress call? He asked. Another species that thinks humans are easy targets, Diana confirmed. Time to teach them otherwise. The Relentless lifted off from New Perth, joining the fleet that was already assembling in orbit. They jumped to faster-than-light travel, racing toward another impossible fight, another desperate situation, another chance to prove that humanity didn't know how to quit. Somewhere in deep space, an alien commander was about to learn what happened when you crossed the line with Deathworlders. They would send their threats and demands confident in their superiority. And humanity would send those threats back to them in flames, just like always.